basically, we will go ahead and start. Laura, thank you so much for being here on the Modern Startup Marketing podcast with me. To introduce Laura, Laura Kendall is the VP of Marketing at MadKudu, which is a startup that was founded in 2014. It's based out of Mountain View, California. And it is about 30 people, right? 30 people.
Yeah.
And prior to MadKudu, Laura was the VP of Marketing at Simple Legal. On the funding side, MadKudu has raised Series A, so $5.5 million. And to give you a description of what it is, it's a lead scoring platform for marketing teams that are looking to create frictionless B2B customer journeys. We're all trying to create frictionless everything journeys. So you can do things like identify the 10% of accounts that will make 90% of the revenue, put VIP visitors in touch with sales without any friction, or you can personalize your outreach based on what the customer actually needs. Companies like Segment, Gusto, and Envision use MadKudu. So welcome, Laura. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to have you on, ask you some questions, share your knowledge. And I know that usually I like to talk about how we met, and we actually met at the beginning of this year when the pandemic hit, and we're both in the we're part of the Women in Revenue group, right? So yeah. I think there was like a support group, and all these ladies joined, including you, and you were going through the transition of starting at MadKudu, right?
Yeah.
And we just kind of, and I was going through the transition of also starting my own thing, and we just sort of shared like what's sort of challenging and asking questions of the other experts in the team. And so that's really how we met, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. And I'm so excited to be here in chat because I think it's such a good story of how networks like Women in Revenue and stuff bring people together, and there are resources for people through, times that I don't even want to say are tough, like just any time. It's good to have a network of like-minded and differing opinion people at your disposal, because it really broadens your horizons, and you meet some amazing people out of it.
Yeah, and I remember like I was trying to give some advice to you, and then I looked you up later and I was like, what am I saying? She's been like VP of marketing at all these places, but you were super, super kind, super nice. So I'm super, super glad that we connected there. And the exciting news also is that you're expecting your first baby girl in January. Yeah. So congratulations. Yeah. That's exciting as well.
Yes, we're very excited, and we're just turning 2022 with all of the positive things despite everything going on.
That's awesome. I'm all for that. So let's get started. So first question for you. Everybody has a different answer, a slightly different answer. What does marketing mean to you?
That's a great question. So I like to think about marketing as really the brand and the lifeblood of an organization. So, I forget who said this. It might have been Ogilvy, or I don't know, but basically it's not my own words, but thinking about brand as what people are saying about you when you're not in the room, right? So it's every marketer's, role to ensure that you're putting out into the market and out into the world, exactly how you want your customers and your prospects, analysts, the market at large to think about you, and how, where you want to put them, or where you want to be put in a particular category, or, alongside other players in the space. But at the end of the day, it really matters what your current users or what the people that you're currently talking to, how are they talking about you to other people? And so a lot of that it's arbitrary. It's difficult to measure. It's, things, like I said, that you're not in the room. So it's it's unlikely that you're going to be in all of those conversations. But at the end of the day, if you're able to track that and understand how the market views you and you can influence that to me is good marketing.
Awesome. And I'll go off a little bit on like some topics that kind of like as naturally come up here. You said something interesting. You said that it's hard to measure. People are having these conversations. They're talking about you, but it's still important to learn about what that is. How do you go about doing that for your, or if it's really important, as you say, how do you do it at MadKudu?
I mean, first and foremost, you have to have a relationship with your customers. You have to talk to them. If you're on the marketing team, you need to be involved. If you're a product marketer, if you're on the product team, if you're in sales, right? Like they are, especially in an early stage company, they are that voice of customer is just so important. And so getting an early understanding of how they think, how they operate, what job they have to do, right, is going to be paramount for you building out your plan, whether that's for your product roadmap or for your marketing strategy or for, you know, your targets from the sales side, like who you should be going after. All of those things can really be kind of, they can be told through a lens of the customer.
Right. So it's not just what you want them to say, it's what they're actually saying. And then you use
Correct.
that. Great. What would be I described MadKudu a bit. What would be the pitch that you would use to describe MadKudu, who you're for and what problem you solve?
Well, I thought you did a great job. So thank you for that wonderful intro. But ultimately, I like to think about us as the one main goal for us is to make every B2B marketer successful. And, you know, no secret that marketers are sitting on a mountain of data. We're in 2020. There's a lot of data at our fingertips. And we help those marketing teams make sense of that data in order to quickly know exactly what they should keep doing. So what's working, what to stop doing, so what's not working, which leads that they should be passing to sales and prioritizing, and that list kind of goes on. But the key differentiator and kind of aha moment for me as a marketer is that all of this is done through a lens of predicted revenue. So thinking about the value that each of these leads will bring to your organization in order to make the right decisions.
Yeah, I hear you. That's come up in different conversations I've had as a challenge for companies, and predicting these leads turning to opportunities and what's the dollar value that you place on them. Absolutely.
Right.
So that all makes sense. What would be the brief story behind how the company got started? I know you joined this year and the company got started in 2014. So what was going on back then, and what were the founders wanting to do?
Yeah, so our founders they worked together at a company prior. Sam, our CEO, he was one of the ones that built the first kind of CDP before customer data platforms were a thing at Agile One, and this was back in, I think, around the 2008 timeframe. Most of their customers were B2C retail, and gosh, what an exciting time for then with the convergence of big data, personalization. And just, we could probably go on a long tangent about the differences and major similarities between B2B and B2C marketing, but we can table that for another conversation. But in any case, while they were there, they, Sam specifically started helping out the Agile One marketing team to better leverage their data and kind of bring those real insights to the board and leadership level meetings in a similar way that B2B marketers were, right? Like, and instead of trying to build something in-house, he started helping them look at vendors, talking to other marketers, and through those conversations is where they realized the huge gap in marketing ops. Marketing operations is very cumbersome. It's not easy always to know exactly what is working and what isn't. And in B2B, it's actually, in my opinion, much harder than in B2C. We've got significantly smaller data sets and more complex buyer journeys in some regards. And so how do we solve that problem? We think about it in kind of three different layers. So the first is around more of a predictive customer data platform, so to say. That like I mentioned, it's built specifically to support those smaller, complex data sets that B2B organizations have at their disposal. And once you have that potential value of the lead through that predictive model, you can start looking at your funnel and start putting actual insights into which channels are performing well. Will you meet your goals next quarter? What should you maybe be reprioritizing and working with sales to build stronger alignment? And that's really all around this predictive intelligence and insights layer. And then the last piece is really around value-based customization and how do you bring all of that together to improve the buyer journey. So this is where I see such a strong convergence between what B2B and B2C are doing. And I am a firm believer of like, we are selling to humans at the end of the day. I don't care if they work for a company or they're buying for their household. And so we can take some pages out of that B2C playbook in order to really truly customize the buyer journey for every individual person.
I'd love to you said that we don't have time to talk about B2B versus B2C and like the similarities and differences, but I always think about that because I work with clients and I've worked at companies as a marketer, both B2B and B2C. And some people don't have that experience of seeing through the lens of like, what is marketing like at a B2C company versus what is marketing like at a B2B company. So what do you think are like the key similarities that basically you can say something like, we're selling to humans. It really doesn't matter, guys. Let's just create a brand. Like there are certain things that you're systematically thinking about within marketing when you think about B2B and B2C and how they can be very similar. And then what are some things that you can't really replicate across both? I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
And I don't even know that I may not be the best person to ask. My background is 100% in B2B. And so a lot of it's learned through conversations like you're having. And, just my perspective is that like, I think about how I want to receive information as a buyer, both on a personal level and as a budget holder for a company, and especially selling to marketers like we do at MadKudu. We're not going to tolerate fluff. Like we know that we're getting sent down a particular nurture email or a drip campaign. We know that we're getting, notifications in different channels for a particular reason. We can connect those dots there. So none of that is necessarily new. I think it's more, how does B2B take it to the next level and learn from companies like, a recent campaign that Sendoso did with Cameo on, connecting those, the B2B and the B2C experience.
I saw that. I actually posted on that on LinkedIn and I was like, this is questionable, but I'm open to it, but this is questionable. But
and so, when I think about like the amount of data that, we're all, like it or not, every interaction we have with our iPhone or with our laptops is being tracked and we're being cataloged as a particular, type of user or potential type of user. And all that data can be used to provide a better experience. If you think about when you log into YouTube or you go into Netflix, your interface is going to look vastly different than mine would. Who knows? Maybe we're into the very same things, and you watch a lot of home development shows as well. But
cat videos.
Yeah, exactly. And how, that is something that is second nature to B2C marketers. It's part of their DNA for decades. I think B2B is has quickly started following suit, but I think we're a little bit behind, and we can learn a lot from folks that have thought about how they're using all of that data. And being able to determine, what points in the buyer journey make sense for us to incorporate a new channel, even if it's a historically, non B2B leverage channel like an Instagram or a TikTok, and those sorts of things. So I think that, B2B teams and companies in general do have a first mover advantage. And, even things like taking advantage of new software, you think about what we do at MadKudu for some of our companies or customers. They don't want to tell all these other marketers about the success they're having, because as soon as, everyone's using, one set of technology or one motion to solve a need, whether it's, higher conversions on a website or, increasing the MQL to demo, conversion rate. Once everyone's doing it, it's no longer the shiny new thing, right?
Yeah, I think that has to do with, I think what you're trying to say is like the channels will get saturated. So you
Absolutely.
don't want that to happen when you figure something out. You're going to try to ride that wave because you know that it's going to get saturated pretty soon if it's working for you. But my vision, and with this podcast too, is I want to share. That's why I'm bringing on startups here and marketing leaders and founders to share more, because I think that generally, I just am of the mindset that we'll all benefit if the more we know. And also,
absolutely.
I don't agree with the fact that if you hear about something working for someone else, it's going to work for your company. I'd love to understand how your MadKudu's teams are structured, including the marketing team. What does that look like?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, we're just about 30 people. So, it's by no means a incredibly large company that has very distinct roles and responsibilities. But we are largely structured like I would say, like a typical SaaS startup with, sales, marketing, customer experience, in addition to product and engineering. We've also built out pretty early in our growth a team that I call them like sitting between, a go-to-market and a product team, which we call internally solution engineers. They act, a bit like an implementation team and or a sales engineering team, all wrapped into one. So, for anyone that's been at a startup of this size or earlier, and even, for a bit after, knows that, while you might sit on one team, you wear many hats. There's many, projects and initiatives that are going to pull people in from a variety of different cross-functional teams to work together to solve a common solution. And so that I think is one of my favorite things about being at a startup. And it works well. As far as the marketing side, so we're early in building the team out. And while we're not there yet, my vision for building out the function itself is to develop kind of a pod structure of focus. So I'm thinking about it as kind of 4 different groups, obviously very interconnected and with any marketing team, kind of in lockstep, focusing on similar initiatives. But the first is around demand and ops. So anything that's bringing in and converting those quality leads into meetings for our sales team. The second is around brand and communications. And so how are we thinking about the thought leadership and the presence that we have in the market? And, like we were talking about, ensuring that when we are not in the room, what are customers and prospects saying about us? The third is around product. So, how are we positioning ourselves? How are we thinking about our, voice of the customer and launching new features and functionality, ensuring that our sales and CS teams are armed with all of the right tools in order to tell the best story. And then the last one, which is probably one of my favorites, and we're going to start building out some really fun stuff that I'll tell you about in a future episode, around customer love and community. And so this one, because of where MadKudu sits, right, in a pretty crowded space of marketing tech solutions, we have some of the most amazing marketing teams that we work with. Like you mentioned, some of them, Segment, we've got Intercoms, Shopify, MongoDB, the list really goes on. how do we, in a typical SaaS motion, ensure that these customers and users are becoming advocates and evangelists for our products? But also, when we build out this idea of a community, how do we incorporate other players in the space? There's a lot of tools that we either integrate with, sit next to, have the potential to integrate with in a future version of the product. When there are so many options for marketers, there's just, I think at one point we calculated the number of tech stack possibilities when you just look at like 3 different tools, like your CRM, your marketing automation tool, and your sales engagement tool, right? Like there's
like 1,000,
8 million or something,
what?
Right? Yeah. Like if you do all the different variations, like there's 300 some different sales and engagement solutions. How do we know, like, how does a startup know which ones they should hitch their wagon to? And so thinking about that and building out a real function within the company to focus on that, I think is going to be a winning strategy.
That's awesome. I love that. Did you call it the customer love team?
Customer love and community.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. And at a 30-person startup, that is amazing that you guys are talking about that, because it's still a lean team. So you need like different functions. You need to think about your operations and your developers and marketing and maybe like folks that are creating the content. But this is almost as important, if not even more important, to have a team like this. So that's awesome that you guys have.
And I think you'll hear from marketers, right? Like, who's the first absolute hire you should make, right? Like, and a lot of that has to do with what type of marketer, the marketing leader is. Like, is their background stronger in demand and revenue, or is it stronger in brand and messaging? And so sometimes leaders might want to bring in somebody who complements their set of skills and can take over an area that they're more confident in, so that they can spend more time in the weeds of the other areas, or vice versa, right? And so for me, I had the fortune of going through this same process at my time at Simple Legal. And what I did is I brought in, first, exactly what my, where my strengths were, so I could hand that off and let someone run with it with confidence, right? And then focus on some of the areas that my background wasn't as strong in, which was a great opportunity to learn and build those skills that I can now bring with me to MadKudu and build out the team, again, and in a way that is, learning from, what worked really well, and also what we could have done differently in order to make it faster and more efficient.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So let's talk about marketing. Let's talk about what you guys are up to. What's working really well for you right now? Like, what channels are you guys using? There are a lot of players in the space, as you said, a lot of marketing tech tools, and specific to what you guys actually are providing too. So tell me about what you guys are doing that's been working really well as of late.
Yeah. So on that, like, there's a lot of noise, gosh. And there are so many distractions that we're competing with as marketers. And I think, we've all been forced into this fully remote environment, and that just brought a whole slew of new types of distractions, and people having to take a step back and think about, from a professional perspective, what are we, are our goals changing this year as a company? As a marketing team, can we rely on the same channels and campaigns that were working before? And so, it's really about, how do you make your brand and your message heard or seen amongst like all of the other messages and brands? Like, every event went virtual. How do you get in front of that? And, so for us, this is where pivoting to more of an educational play versus a, going out and continuing trying to push your product has been really helpful. Obviously not a novel idea by any means to not, start selling the minute you open your mouth. But I think to put it more specifically and more tactical, we recognize this year that we have a real differentiator in our ability to support companies that are either embarking on a product-led growth motion. So maybe as a result of, COVID and the pandemic and changes in their, go-to-market strategy, they've decided that they want to try out a free product or offer a free trial. And then on the flip side, companies that have been in leveraging a product-led motion at their core. So because of that focus, what we started to do is put content and webinars together that was specifically meant for that segment of the market, but in a way that was meant to help them, right? So not talking about what specifically MadKudu does for them, but rather bringing product-led growth leaders together to share how they've reacted to the pandemic, or what has worked for them. We had the good fortune of having some amazing guest speakers from Product-Led Institute, Wes Bush, or Sam Richard from OpenView to talk about their perspectives on this go-to-market motion that is getting a lot of headway and a lot of awareness this year, and getting their thoughts on what it means. And we've gotten just some amazing feedback on again, everyone's going to virtual venues, but the key for us was keeping it pretty tactical as opposed to strategic, because I think myself included, I want to walk away with 1, 2, or 3 things that I can actually apply, as opposed to spending an hour in the strategic clouds, as I call them. So that's one area. In addition, we started offering one-on-one meetings to share what we've learned by talking with other players. So this, kind of going down the funnel a little bit, but it gets our leaders and our founders out there as thought leaders. And it's also an easier ask than doing a demo. So if we can say, hey, because we've spoken with hundreds of different companies that have a product-led motion, here's a few things that we've learned. Like, we've put content out, we have videos recorded, but if you'd want to spend, 30 minutes with one of our experts, like, we're happy to share that. It's a time where we're helping each other is first and foremost, right? And so that we've seen some good success with. And then the last thing that I'll mention is along the same lines, and now even further down the funnel, is when we do have a company that is interested in moving forward with us, we're testing out a model where we offer like a 1-month proof of concept instead of requiring an annual commitment. So it's really all about helping them recognize the value sooner, because the last thing right now anybody who holds budget is going to do is put, throw out any, 4, 5, 6-figure number, throwing that out into the universe without knowing when you're going to see the ROI. And it's very difficult to trust a vendor who tells you, no, we've had, 99% of the time, like, ROI is seen in, 6 to 12 weeks, or within 3 months, you'll accomplish this. It's a lot right now for us to take somebody's word for it. So having the opportunity to, see it ourselves, touch it, feel it, explore it, all of those things, that's been working well.
That's great. Yes, it does sound like you guys are kind of like stepping outside of the box, trying to figure out, given the year, how do you gain that trust from prospective clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
In different ways, like the one-to-one meetings and the proof of concept, getting over that barrier. And it's not the traditional, like, well, just let's do a product demo, we'll just show it to you, and focusing on that, but other ways to gain that trust. So that's great. Great examples. So what about on the challenges front? What are you guys trying to figure out? Maybe it's this year and the impact that it's been having on you alongside other companies. What's something that you guys are still trying to figure out and it's keeping you up at night?
So I think that's absolutely one is figuring out this year and pivoting our strategy just like every other organization. I think one benefit we have is that where we're at as a company, especially with my joining, right at the turn of shelter in place. It's not that we had built out a fully, functioning team yet. It wasn't, we didn't have, a 2-3 year plan that we were trying to go after from a marketing strategy perspective. So we built our kind of initial strategy at the time of COVID. So we were kind of, those two aligning. I'm choosing to see that as the glass half full. But I think, that maybe not the most innovative answer to that question. So what I'd rather share is, I think it's something that all startups are faced with. And in my experience, I've seen some do it very well and some struggle. And I'm super pumped that at MadKudu, we really honor this notion of focus and prioritization. So there's obviously hundreds of things. I mean, I think with marketing, but at startups in general, there's hundreds of things that we could be doing. Given our size, given the market we play in, everyone is testing out new channels. Like, we want to test out all of the different channels too. But I'm a firm believer that trying to be everything to everyone and, that the jack of all trades, expert of none is not going to win the big fight. So especially this early in our growth, we have to think about what we are going to spend our time and our resources on, and ensure that the company is aligned on what those initiatives are. So on the marketing side specifically, what I try to do is, we go through our planning cycles. We do it annually, and then we also break it down into quarters and revisit quarterly and monthly. So we are in lockstep with each other as a leadership organization to ensure that we can quickly react to any additional changes or challenges that come our way, which is the ideal state, right? You don't want to set a plan for the year and then just, catch up again at the, end of Q4. But on the marketing side, I try to take that and then think about what are the 2 to 3 main growth levers or channels that we want to focus on. Like I mentioned, of course, I want to go in, 6 or 7 different digital channels and test them out. And of course, I want to try podcasts and do more event sponsorships and things. But the reality is that we have to narrow our focus on a particular segment of the market, and we have to think about where the 10x is going to lie to know where we should put our budget and our resources. So by picking kind of 2 to 3 main growth levers, it helps me, but it also helps the rest of the company by having a blueprint, so to speak, that is going to be the blueprint for how we build the team out, what trade-offs we're going to make. So for example, it makes it a lot easier to say, if what you're asking marketing to do, or if what we have an idea to do something and it doesn't fall into one of these 2 or 3 growth levers, we have to make a conscious decision about whether or not we're going to invest in it, because there are trade-offs. We can't do it all. And then lastly, using that is a great way to then measure success. So did we accomplish what we set out to do within each of those channels, or did we get distracted and go in multiple different directions, which sometimes distractions are good. So let me pause there.
I think this is what you just said is something that seems so simple to understand, but it's so hard to actually do. It's easy to say, hard to do, especially in marketing, where you're excited to try all these things, and then the CEO learned about this and that other company's doing that, and they send over that email and let's try that because look how cool this is. And you're trying to keep everyone focused on those 2 to 3 main channels and measuring them, making sure that they're working. It's such I think an ongoing struggle, right? With the marketing team trying to stay focused, but at the same time, you do want to flex your muscles and try some new things. It's hard to create that balance. So you said that you have a systematic way that you try to do this. And I think that's so important, that's so great that you mentioned that you do that. My question is then, the focus areas, are those mainly the things that you told me about, the channels that are working, right? Like the webinar series. And I saw that product-led growth webinar coming through. I think that's going to happen in December. That's working well for you, the webinars, or are you still kind of trying to see if people are, people say they're going to attend, do they actually attend? How do you know that it's going well?
Yeah. So specifically with webinars, yeah, they're absolutely working. And part of that is, I see any program as three different stages. There's the pre-program effort. So setting up the foundation, ensuring that you're targeting the right people, that your messaging is solid. There's the during the program, like once you've kicked it off and launched it. In this case, it's an event, so it's very easy to say, like the day of the webinar, like you've got your content, your speakers know what they're doing, you're engaging with the audience that comes. You've probably sent them a couple of notes to get questions ahead of time to further drive them to actually attend versus just register and get the recording, things like that. And then there's the post event. So following up, things like what I mentioned, offering one-on-one time with one of the panelists, ensuring that we continue to provide value-added content because it's clear that they're interested in this type of, educational thought leadership piece. And so all three of those are equally as important. And one thing that for us has worked very well is being able to leverage MadKudu ourselves to know, which people are attending, our events or engaging with us through a variety of different channels. How should sales react to them? What, how much, effort should marketing put into continuing to engage with them in other channels? And so being able to kind of drink our own Kool-Aid and show how we use our own product to know when and how we should engage with prospects has been a game changer for us. And what it's really allowed us to uncover is that this idea of personalization is greater than automation. So I think there's a time and a place for quickly replying to someone and getting a reply in someone's prospect's inbox as quickly as possible without personalization. But like I mentioned, if we're reaching out to marketers, we have to have some sort of value add. We have to think outside of the box. We have to show exactly what we mean in a very succinct way and with conviction. And that third piece of every program, that follow-up is exactly where that has to happen.
So are you using your own platform for that personalization, or are you using it to help inform and give you insights on where you should be personalizing, like which accounts and which people?
Both.
Okay. Okay, cool. That's awesome. I think those are both needs. And I've heard from many folks time and time again, like personalization will always win at the end of the day. And I was going to ask you, how are you using your own product within your company? Because if you're not, then that's definitely a problem spot. I'd love to ask you about your transition from your previous company, Simple Legal, to MadKudu. I remember talking to you when we had that session with the Women in Revenue, that support group, and there was a lot of things that were going through your head. Like, what were the things that what helped you during that transition? What were you thinking about? What were you doing that made that transition maybe easier? Just thinking back to that time.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing is there's always an unknown when you go into a new organization. And as much time you spend with the founders and the board and other leaders ahead of time, there's still a lot to be uncovered once you're actually in the role. The added layer of, okay, I'm not going to meet everyone in person. We don't have an office now because, we're all working from home, and who knows how this market is going to shift in the coming months and quarters, given, the pandemic and then, where the economy may go. Plus it's an election year. Like all these things are coming into play, right? And so a lot of, with any transition, there are concerns or unknowns, as I mentioned. But I think it was especially prevalent this year. And for me specifically, what was, sorry, let me go back to your question of, can you repeat it?
Yeah. I'm actually curious, like what did you do to like create, because we just went into like remote, right?
Yeah,
we went into like a remote environment, and what did you do to kind of like make sure that transition, meeting the team and like the challenges faced by being remote, how did you do it? What helped you?
Yeah. So first, what I will say is that once I got, the founding team, the company in general is Coming on as a marketing leader can be a very lonely role, especially when you are the first and only marketer, which I was at Simple Legal. And so having had that experience, I kind of knew going in, like, here's some things that I need to make sure I do. Things like align very early on with the founders and get an understanding of the vision and make sure that you are bought into, where they want to take the company and that you're able to articulate what that means to other marketers. But I think with the shift to fully remote, there are a lot of things, like a lot of different conversations that you might get left out on. So being super proactive about, hey, I want to be in this meeting, or hey, can you include me in that? Because at the end of the day, they don't know necessarily what having a marketing leader on their on their payroll looks and feels like. And so it's really your responsibility to make sure that they know how to include you, when to include you, and what to expect from you. And that was a lot of those learnings came from my experience in my previous roles. I also think that, if I were listening to this podcast and like someone was in my shoes, like recommendations I would make would be around, inserting yourself in as many ways as possible. Remembering that for the first 90 days, you are a fresh set of eyes, and you only get that for the first 90 days. So ask all the questions, be in all the conversations, talk to all of the people, because that's going to help you ingest the right information to build a solid plan and a solid strategy. Does that answer your question?
It does answer my questions. Yeah. Wonderful. Another question that I have for you is, what would you say is this year? I mean, I don't even want to talk about it, like how there are all these topsy-turvy things happening, but what's been your big marketing aha moment these past 6 to 12 months? Maybe something that your team figured out. It could be small, it could be huge. What is something that was maybe it was underground and then you guys uncovered maybe an insight or a trend or a channel or something like that these past 6-12 months?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I have to roll it up into just being empathetic, as cheesy as that might sound, but we're all figuring it out. And I mentioned when we talk about events that had to pivot and go virtual after months of planning in person. I know a lot of them have likely gotten a lot of grief from sponsors of like, hey, a virtual booth doesn't, I want my money back. It doesn't work the same as an in-person booth. One example of where empathy can go a long way. We've all had customers that have had to reevaluate their spending, and the vendors that they choose to partner with. And, if in the time of need, you're like, hey, you need to either you're paying this, invoice, or we're turning off your product. Like, I think we saw some really amazing examples of companies leaning in and helping, especially in the small, mid-size B2B space where in candidly, they were probably hit pretty hard because they don't have, as much infrastructure and as deep of pockets as some of these bigger organizations have. Founders have been trying to navigate, they're navigating these tough times, right? Like, can you imagine, having to consider how you're going to potentially pivot your company completely, or, change the product entirely to react to, all of the different things that were thrown at us this year. As humans, most of us have probably at some point throughout the last 6 to 12 months spent way more time in front of the computer or working 50 plus more hours a week, dealing with homeschooling, figuring out how to live in a society where all of the infrastructure that we used to rely on is no longer there. And it reminds me of, I remember, back to maybe this is a silly example, like Hurricane Katrina or Harvey, or when they hit, and we were in California. It didn't affect us, so to speak, but we realized, I remember one day we're like, wait, everyone needs to pause. Like, we should not be prospecting into companies that have people in that area or are headquartered there or anything, right? Like, so it's just this lens of just think about things before you do them. Think about how, have that empathy, because especially in our ever expanding digital world, it's important that we start thinking about our prospects and our customers as a whole person and not just an employee of a company. So back to that like business to human thought.
Yeah, I know you mentioned this very briefly, the virtual booth. And so many companies have been relying on in-person conferences and then can't do that anymore. Have you guys have you tried the virtual engagement platforms? Okay, you guys decided not to do that. Okay.
We have not, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We're looking in for 2021, we're looking into like what event sponsorships we'll want to do, and have talked to several people who have had both good and bad experiences with some of the new ways that we're trying to handle things. But it'll be interesting to see how, that experiential marketing evolves in 2021.
The experience and then also the impact, and because there's so many different things that happen when you're in person, like random serendipitous moments, right? And so how do you build that into a product? So I find that fascinating too. Wonderful. Laura, thank you so much for coming on here. You shared a lot of great juicy nuggets around your team and around the channels that are working for you, going specifically into which ones you guys are using and like in what order, how your team is kind of reaching out, providing content, educational content, and then reaching out afterwards. The challenges, right? Like the focus being a really difficult thing, and trying to focus on the main channels and having like a straight line looking forward and into next year. And also talking about like your transition from one company to the next during the pandemic. We talked about a lot. And so I want to say thank you so much for being on here. And yes, I do hope to have you back on here you said there was something coming, something exciting is coming to talk about for next year.
Well, there's always exciting things. I think there's joining a company this early and building out the team from scratch, it means that everything that you're doing is new and exciting. So I would love to come back and share, more things that we've learned and more channels that we've been able to test and more things that we're focusing on.
Wonderful. Well, if anyone wants to reach Laura, they can do so on LinkedIn, Laura Kendall. And to find out more about MadKudu, you can go to madkudu.com. Thank you, Laura. Have a great one.
Thanks so much.